So good morning, everyone. As always, we've a Grass10 team member. We've John Maher on with us this morning in terms of giving us an update in terms of where the grass situation is at. There's been a fair bit of rain over the last week, so we're hoping for some positive news, John. And then we'll be followed up by James O'Donoghue, dairy advisor in the Monaghan area, in terms of more localised in terms of what's happening in the Monaghan area over the last couple of weeks. So maybe things to look out for. So I suppose, John, without further ado, give us the good news, I suppose.
Yeah, you're right. The rain has come, James, in most places, not all now, but most. Yeah, to be fair. All the figures from Pasture Base Ireland that Kieran puts together have shown that there's been a fair degree of recovery in grass supply, which is great now, right, to be honest, and we needed that, right? So most farms have got back to where they need to be in terms of supply. You've average farm cover around 700, growth higher than demand by about 10 kilos per day. So that's all the good news, right? The challenge, though, to be honest, is not the supply side. It's for most now, not all, but for most, it's grass quality. And unfortunately, the plant made a decision to turn reproductive before the rain came. That decision is irreversible, and we're living with the consequences of that now. So grass quality is the real challenge now on farms, right? And that has to be addressed. And the reason it has to be addressed and addressed fairly fast is we're 2 rotations away from building for the autumn. You do not want to be building grass covers on poor quality, because you'll just fight it all the way into the autumn. You won't get to do what you want to do, and if the weather turns bad, it turns particularly difficult then to get good performance and get the sward set up well in the autumn for the spring. So I suppose there's a lot of disappointment out there with grass quality, but we have to deal with it. The milk proteins and the yields show that, I suppose. So, but we have to get on with it, try and fix it. It's not the easiest. However, there are certain things we should do, and I suppose that's what I'm going to cover right now, James. There's probably 3 approaches. Okay. Where grass supply is good or above normal, then the reality is you shouldn't be fighting this. Those pieces of grass or paddocks that are wrong should be bailed out, really, to be honest. We're also tight on silage in many places because some was fed. The spring was difficult. So let's be clear here, we need silage for next winter, and there's a great opportunity here to turn this surplus grass or poor quality grass into baled silage for next winter, right? And to do, the dry cow season or whatever the case may be, rather than trying to fight it. Now, there's only so much we can take out, and we take out the worst ones and accept that, and you keep at it, and you be proactive about it. The cows can do a lot for you, and in some cases, I suppose the specific one here is where the wedge is very flat. You're going to, if you wait and delay taking out the meal or delay taking out the silage or other feeds, and you wait for this to turn to 1,400, 1,500, then by the time you get to the next paddock and subsequent paddocks, they're all gone wrong on you. So you have to be brave here. Growth is generally higher than demand. The fertilizer is starting to work. There's massive soil release of nitrogen as well, because that hasn't been used up during the drought. We have moisture, we have higher soil temperatures. So, you have to back yourself here in terms of being brave in terms of grassland management. Take out the surpluses, especially where they exist. There will be surpluses coming because the way the figures are and because the rain has come, and you have to do that too. Be brave with the cows, maybe go into covers of 12, 1,300, 1,100 to keep the wedge right, that will, rather than end up fighting it. And I suppose the last piece then is, if you have those 2 pieces done, then we move into the whole area of mechanical correction of, topping and all that kind of stuff. But that's choice number 3. It's not choice number 1. The bales is number 1, the cows is number 2, and then you bring in the mower to fix things, really. Not more first, to be honest, in terms of topping or pre-cutting or any of those things. We don't exactly like all those things. They can be wasteful in terms of grass, right? And when you're constantly topping or mowing or pre-cutting, like, there is waste here. You're not fixing the problem where you are short of silage. So let's keep that in mind, okay? So take out the surpluses first, be brave, let the cows do the job as best they can, and then we move into the other areas of mechanical correction. I suppose that's the points of that, James. I will make mention, because the rain has come, of reseeds, particularly the later sown ones. The weed populations are very, very high. There's 2 issues. One is the weed population, and the second then is the establishment or germination. There has been early establishment, and then there's what we call secondary establishment or secondary germination of new plants coming. However, especially where you have grass and clover swards, you only get one chance to control docks in particular on those. There's a narrow window. When that dock plant is right, you have to take the chance to use your herbicide to control those docks, right? I can live with chickweed because if you graze it, it'll come out. I accept thistles are a challenge, but you can't let this window opportunity go. And it's a balance. And people are saying, I'll delay. If the dock gets too mature and the root gets established, you will not kill it. These herbicides that we use are clover friendly. They're not the strongest in the world. You get your opportunity, you must take it. Look, the way the weather has come with the rain and all, and if you get the grazing management right, these swards will tiller out. They will fill in, and you have to have faith in it. But don't miss your choice on the herbicides. Now, I will say to you, most of the weeds that have come are what we call annuals, and the classic one being fat hen. There's also red shank and those kind of weeds. But once they are cut, topped, or grazed by the cows, like that's their lifeline, finished. Yeah. They disappear. So don't let the opportunity go on the herbicide with the docks. I think that's the key one here, James. Yeah. Now you've probably a question for me.
Yeah, one last question maybe around, because there's bits and pieces coming in, and I'd say James is seeing it too. Conversations around second cut, quality, heading out. What do farmers do in that situation, I suppose?
Yeah, I suppose we all have to have an eye on what's happening next winter. I'll start there, James. The second cuts are very variable, right? You have variability in quality and variability in recovery. Obviously, the earlier you cut, I think the better, first cut, the better you are, the later you cut, you got stuck in the drought, some of the plants have turned reproductive and you have seed head and stuff like that, right? Some people have topped up on the fertilizer, they split it, and that was probably a good decision. However, to me, James, I'll just make it as simple as this. If the second cut looks extremely stemmy and it's all gone to stem, I think you just cut your losses, take this out and reset the whole platform, plant and platform and silage production on the farm. You'll get an opportunity somewhere along the way to take other surpluses along the way. Waiting for this stuff to try and bulk up. If it just shoots up a stem, right?
Yeah,
it's not going to tiller, and the only way to get this is you take it off and reset. So
you will never get the yield in that situation.
No, you won't. No, and when your chance comes, I think you just take what's there and reset it. And you may have to adjust your system a little bit and might take silage somewhere else or whatever the case may be. But like if it's gone so stemmy at this stage, just take it out and reset. And you will get somewhere along the way with rain falling at the moment and all that to maybe pick up surpluses somewhere else to try and refill the cupboard for next winter. But trying to persist with very, very stemmy grass is wasteful, I think. I just don't think you're going to get there in terms of yield or quality. We see what happens in drought is that the parent plant takes over, it suppresses the tillers and tillering. That's why the swards turn thin. And that's happened in silage ground as well. So there's only one way to do this. Remove it and get out your slurry, get out your fertilizer and start again.
So maybe just to finish in 30 seconds, I suppose, what's your 3 key points for the week ahead, I suppose, for the listeners?
Right. Very simply, address grass quality on the grazing platform as fast as you can, take out the surpluses, be brave with the cows, and then look, if all those things are done and we still have issues, use the mower to correct. But it's cows and surpluses in bales first. That's the approach. Right. The second point then, I suppose, James, is the reseed. You have to take the chance to get the herbicide on at the right time to control those docks, right? Okay, you're going to get one window. If they get too mature, the sprays will struggle to kill them. And the last piece, then, where the second cuts are gone extremely stemmy, you have to just cut your losses here and take it out. I don't know, bales, I suppose, will be the obvious one because the cut won't be that heavy.
Yeah.
And get your slurry on and reset and maybe pick up surpluses elsewhere or, do another version of a cut somewhere along the way, right? But look, I think I think the word here that we're looking for all this when it's grass changes, proactive.
Appreciate that, John.
Okay.
There's a lot in that, and as you said, there's work to be done on farms in terms of maybe just correcting that grass quality.
Yeah, now that the rain has come now, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
All
We'll see
right.
you next week. I think you have a demo on next Tuesday in Moor Park.
Yeah, we have a big day. Big day. We're there yesterday getting ready and all that. We have a big day Monday to get it all ready as well, I suppose. But look, the demo's there. Yes, it's right after the boards. It always gets great feedback. You'll come and meet us and we'll talk through all the things we've just dealt with, James, to be honest.
We'll have a look and see what the grass quality is
like, as well. Exactly. Thank you, James.
All right. Thanks, Sean.
All right.
So as I said earlier, folks, I suppose for the second part of this morning's webinar, we're being joined by James O'Donoghue, who's dairy advisor in County Monaghan, cabin man in County Monaghan now, as we figured out before we kicked off this morning. So I think, did you see you have an Armagh flag in the background, Jim, before this weekend? But look, we'll get on to the serious stuff. I suppose we heard from John there in terms of grass and grazing and where it's at, and I suppose what's the localized situation and in Monaghan, and I suppose you're going to explain to us that it differs across the county as well.
Yeah, well, look at thanks very much, James, for having me on. So look, I suppose leading on to from what John was saying, we had a Grass10 course here in Monaghan on Monday, and just looking at some of the data that we pulled from that for this morning, grass growth has kicked off significantly in the last 7 days compared to what we've seen towards the latter half of May, early June. That's probably coming from higher levels of rainfall. I was just looking at the weather data, and I think in some places have got up to 80 mil of rain in total for June. So things are starting to correct itself in terms of growth. And as you rightly said, the county varies here, between north and south. Obviously, the more north you go, the more heavier soils you're getting into, whereas south, you're into, different soil type. And, the drought, obviously, or the lack of rainfall and drought situation affected them farms greater. And you've seen growth rates, over the last month drop down maybe as far as 30 kilos on them farms. Look, on average for the last 7 days, just pulled it off there, but anything from high 60s to early 70s in terms of an average growth rate across farms, and like that on the heavier soils, we've seen that they're getting in excess of maybe 80, 90 on average. So most notably, I suppose what we've seen at the beginning of June, John expressed it there and said that the grass plant was getting stressed, and that post grazing yields were at the 1400 or below, and grass quality was it was poor. So there was no opportunity there to correct it. If you look at the post grazing height on a lot of these, on a lot of farms now, they're starting to approach 1700. So that'd suggest that there's an opportunity there to go in, take out these surpluses, and very quickly I think we can get farms back on track. I think there has been some level of correction done in the last week. If that continues now this week, you're setting yourself up well then for the month of July, I think.
Yeah. So really, it's not that different in terms of the big thing is correcting grass quality over the next couple of weeks.
Absolutely,
that's where it's at.
Yeah.
And it has, as you say, come out of a tough spring and then into a dry period. So there is a bit of work to be done on farms over the next few weeks. And that, just to touch on the fodder situation, where is that at within the region?
Yeah, funny, we completed a number of fodder budgets with clients over the last while, and look, as you said there, going back, let's just go back a step to last winter. I suppose there's a lot more cows housed in March, and a lot more days spent inside than people would have liked. So obviously reserves have been eaten into, and anyone that was carrying that bit of surplus from year to year, I'd say that surplus has come under pressure due to March past. So looking at what the silage is needed on farms, I think we're coming in there between what first cut was made and what small bit of reserve was left on farm. We've about 60% of our winter feed for the coming winter gathered up. Now the problem, as John said previously, is second cut silage is now anyone that cut early is probably all right, but those that cut at the start of that dry period, the plant has, moved to that reproductive stage. Maybe, fertilizer could have been delayed going out on them swards in some cases with the dry weather, seen that in some cases. So, that conversation has to be had. Do you reset and go again? Because, like I said, there's only 60% there. That's not taken into account a reserve, James. That 60% is what's needed for, based on the stock numbers that's on the farm and based on your average winter period. So there's no 1 month reserve added to that. So look, there's the same again, you might say, that has to be required and collected for these farms. Yeah.
And so you mentioned it there, I suppose, is the starting point, and I suppose I'm sure you're encouraging through the groups really to get a fodder budget done over the next couple of weeks. Know where you're at. Mm-hmm. Is there an opportunity there too in terms of look at if you do need feed or identifying deficits that you go out and maybe get a bit of dry cow feed or something now? It's
yeah. I think first of all, the fodder budget allows you to, before, without having one, you're just guessing, and anyone that has maybe extra cow numbers or less land or something like that this year, maybe the situation has changed from other years. Sitting down, doing that fodder budget, 5-10 minutes will complete it. It's there on pasture base. It's a great tool, and it gives you your percentage in terms of what you have, or in days short or days extra. So very suddenly you can see what's in store. And as you say, if you're in that situation that you haven't enough, or your requirements aren't there, allows you maybe to go out if there is the opportunity to purchase some dry cow feed at the minute in terms of bales, or look at the other thing. We're at the beginning of July. I think hopefully we get good growth rates through July, and before we start thinking about building grass for the autumn time, there is that opportunity to take out more paddocks, correct grass as well, and with the hope of getting maybe maybe more quantity in our third cut.
Yeah, as you said, there's an opportunity there in terms of for farms maybe to identify and get a third cut squeezed in.
Yeah.
Right, we've heard a lot about grass so far, and the big thing is correction, I suppose. Breeding. How is it? I suppose how has it went, or what are you seeing on the ground? And has there been changes this breeding season to that differs from any other, I suppose?
Yeah, well, notably, I suppose if we go back to the springtime, what I would notice among clients is there obviously the number one bigger appetite is there's more appetite for the use of sex semen. But, actually going back, there's actually more usage, I think, of sire advice, the sire advice program being used. I definitely see that year on year, and more detailed and more use of the extra functions as available within the sire advice program. And particularly sitting down with you go to sit down with a client now to use the sire advice, the first thing that's pulled out is the annual milk recording from the year previous, and cows are highlighted for, either dairy breeding, beef breeding, let it be for culling, etc. So the two of them are working very well hand in hand, James. I definitely see, the extra functions are being used, and that's leading on then to those giving lads confidence to use extra, to use more sex semen than they were previously. I know some farms have gone all sex semen, which is leading on to a lot more selection on beef bulls, and using the dairy beef index, and sitting down and selecting your cows for beef breed, and selecting the bulls then that's going to be used, and having a selection of having a variety of bulls within breeds. I think that has been a big change, particularly in the last 18 months. Also, probably what you also see from this is that AI isn't lasting as long on. They're not doing as much AI in particular. So in some cases you're seeing stock bulls being let out on week 5 and week 6. So that in itself poses a challenge in terms of bull power. and you definitely see more demand for stock bulls, more level of stock bulls on farms, and I think there is, it's well highlighted at this stage that you need, if you the earlier you go out with your stock bull, the more bull power you need. So the more bulls you need, from a herd size point of view, that can range from a minimum of 2 to definitely up to 4. So look, depending on herd size, obviously. So
yeah. So really, there, what you're I suppose the conversation around that is just to be careful. I suppose you're encouraging the AI for as long as you can, but just be mindful in terms of that.
I think for those that have only AI'd for the short number of weeks, that there has to be a bigger emphasis on bull power. Whereas if you're AIing up to week 7 or 8, maybe look at the emphasis obviously still there for bull power, but and I think sourcing these bulls early on in the year is crucial too. That you're not leaving that decision until the end of May or early June. I think having them there and having them settled is good.
As always, folks, you can post your questions if you have any questions for James. But I suppose 2 other things on the breeding side of things. The first one, finishing date. Is that a constant battle? Is that something is that one you're winning? Or how is that going?
Yeah.
I see you smiling here now. So
yeah, I think everybody knows their start date. The finish date is a problem at times, and there is times you go out to farms and towards the middle or end of July or even early August, and the stock bull is there, and you get the excuse that he broke out or something. So I think at this stage now, I think it has to be in everybody's mind. Well, right, I started on such a date, and pick your breeding season length, if it's 11, 12, 30, whatever it is, and go. What date does that bring you to? And that's the date that it has to stop, James. And think if you just look back maybe on April and May, and if you had any late calving cows, maybe the challenges they posed to you in terms of maybe if was there any difficulties with them, or the dragged out in terms of the calving season and labor and all the rest, and selling his calves. So look, I think you have to look back on that. Do I want that next year? And just say there has to be a cut-off date when these bulls come out. Just to go back, and you said what other look at probably a lot more use of synchronized programs on heifers. Just chatting to a few yesterday that maybe had done early scans or had been recording repeats or whatever. Look at a mixed mixed results, but generally speaking, some good conception rates to date, and some average enough. So, more usage of sync programs. But I feel when people get a couple of years of under their belt of using the program, the more confident they become with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, on that tail end cows, ultimately, usually it's a very small number of cows. Mm-hmm. I would say every cow now is coming under question, given the circumstances and the value of each cow on farm. So really, those late calving cows. But I think I'm confident from being in Monaghan over the last few months that's one you're winning. Come here, the genotype program. Just to touch on it, actually, the National Genotyping Program. What's the feeling, or have you had group meetings since that has been released, or what's the conversation like?
I'll be honest. It's probably the conversation has been slow, so to speak. Have had no kind of group interactions since the launch of it. But definitely, those that have pushed on in terms of breeding and use of particularly selective breeding going forward, you can see that a level of interest generating from clients on the program, and it'll be watch this space, I think.
Yeah, very good. The last thing I want to touch base with you on, and I know you spoke at the National Dairy Conference last back end regarding costs and cost structure, and look, we've seen costs increase significantly, obviously, in 2022. They've carried into 2023, albeit they're easing now. But I suppose the conversation around that at farm level, milk price has dropped by 20 cent or in or around 20 cent a litre. Is there a conversation happening? What's the thoughts at farm level?
There is, and I suppose, you know, you've seen a dramatic change within, say, 12 months, and everybody's aware of that fact. And if you look back to the cost of production for last year, which hasn't really, as you say, significantly changed that much, particularly for the first half of the year. I see inputs, you know, for the second half is going to be different. But you look at the average cost of production is somewhat ranging from, you know, in anything from 35 to 37 cent for the average of my clients here in County Monaghan for last year. So, you know, it has been raised and questions have been asked about the level of profitability for the year coming in. So look, there is that tool there, the Profit Monitor projection tool, and we've run that with two groups in June. And I suppose what we done was, you know, we looked at first of all, we looked at the our outputs, right, in terms of the big one there being milk. I suppose, you know, it accounts for well over 90% of the income coming into the dairy farm. So look, we have reset that based on where based on where the group felt it was going to sit for this year, keeping in mind, I suppose, that there was those early months when, you know, milk prices were a wee bit higher than it is now. So we took that into position. We like, in terms of the our inputs in terms of meal and fertilizer. Obviously, we've seen them come back, but we readjusted them slightly. We increased the ESB, and we kind of inflated all other costs then, James, by about 5%. You know, in running with national inflation. So, you know, that's kind of what we done. We didn't go around and change a whole pile. We just went in, looked at the big ones, and then I suppose when you take look at the profit figure, but then take your drawings, you know, household drawings, which varies among farms, repayments, and we look at tax. You know, we're very much sitting at break even. The examples that we're doing, you know, when we take in them three other cash costs, let's say, they are, you know, farms are sitting at break even. So look, you know, the question was asked at group meetings this month, you know, what are you doing differently, or what are you doing this month that in terms of cost savings? Generally speaking, what came back, a lot of clients are looking at trying to improve their grass quality for, you know, the latter half of 2023 to try and that was, you know, leading on to maybe hoping to reduce meal fed, you know, if they can increase the quality of grass. So look, we've spoken about that earlier on. So obviously, if that's done, a lot of farms can do that. Yeah, you know, a lot of clients saying that, you know, they're watching everything that they're doing. You know, there's no unnecessary spending. And
I was going to say that, James, is probably, you said to me that yesterday when we were talking, there's a lot less work probably going on at farm level this year in terms of.
Absolutely, and that's a matter of maybe just resetting yourself as well. For a lot of clients that would have, you know, with last year, there was a lot of good work done in terms of, you know, drainage work, reseeding, you know, labour saving devices, all that, and it's just a matter now of, you know, if we were in that mindset for 12 months, we need to, you know,
it's even maybe having a wee, isn't it? It's having a wee plan around that, and maybe not doing as much out of cash flow as such. It's not to say that those things have to stop as such.
Absolutely, and funny, you know, we asked that question: what are you doing to reduce cost? You know, it was thrown in there that people are reseeding. They see that as a method of reducing costs going forward. So, like, I don't think you stop completely. Particularly jobs in terms of grazing infrastructure, grassland, etc. That can be looked at, and it can be, short-term finance can be used maybe to get you, if needed, if you want to be taken from cash flow. The other thing, I suppose, James, to lead on from that is that, you really need to be looking now at milk accordance and looking at cows, and we talked about late calving cows. We're at that level, where farms are at a break even. There is maybe possibly on some farms where cows maybe that aren't performing, high cell count, whatever, them cows are starting to become very questionable whether they should be there or not. You have a good cull cow price at the minute, so and
the fodder situation too, James.
Yes,
into that
yeah,
as well.
And tomorrow's the last. Tomorrow's the last stage. We have 6 months done. We're going into the last 6 months of 2023. Everyone is probably over the next couple of weeks is probably going to receive the first interim nitrates report for 2023. That's going to be different for everybody. Due to cow banding. If you're used to being at a certain figure at the midpoint of every year, that's going to be different. Okay, so I think as a recommendation, that would be to sit down and look at that, and that ties into the whole, marginal cow, let's call it, or cow, in terms of cost as well. That if these cows are adding to a nitrates problem, well then, now is the time maybe that'll you have time to correct it.
Yeah, very good. There's a question in there, and you've actually answered it from David, but that 35 to 37 cent that you mentioned, does that include own labour? So you've done the calculations over and above that. Yeah. It's different for every farm, and I suppose you've done that with your groups, I suppose.
Yes.
I suppose did they get a the last question I'll ask on that is, did they get a surprise when they sat down and actually worked through that break-even cost?
Absolutely, yeah. Because I think sometimes, we're great at talking about the cost of production, but when we add those 3 other costs back in and look at the break-even, it can change the picture. It can change the picture very quick. So yeah, and it's not a laborious task. If you have your figures there from last year, you'll sit down and do this with a client in 15-20 minutes. So a good exercise to do at, particularly at the halfway point.
Yeah, very good. And I suppose that's you have the power of that in terms of you have an awful lot of clients completing that profit Maher analysis. So it leaves it easy to do that. There's one other question, and I think we'll wrap up then, and I want to just a little chat around the Maher Park Open Day. For reseeds, I suppose, really the question here is if you're spraying off and you want to get a good kill, I suppose, of docks, what's your spray of choice? Is it Roundup is the question?
Yeah, and I suppose, yeah, right. It has to be Roundup, and look, at going at a stage where there's good. I think you get the best response to Roundup when the grass plant is grow. You're getting a high growth rate. So particularly anyone that's looking at reseeding now that didn't, maybe missed out on it for the last month due to, the grass growth being low and supply of grass being low, that now is the opportunity if you're not looking at taking out surpluses to go in and reseed and Roundup. Yes, yeah,
very good. Look at James. I think it's always good to have advisors on. I appreciate your time. It's important to kind of get that local knowledge in terms of what's happening, what sort of conversations are being had. As you say, I suppose the big focus is grass. It's finishing the breeding season, and then you've had that conversation with your clients in terms of cost of production, but then for every farm, knowing your break-even costs. And making decisions based on those conversations is the key thing. So I appreciate your time this morning. Just for 2 minutes, folks, I just want to highlight the fact that the Maher Park 23 Open Day is on next Tuesday, Tuesday the 4th of July. Gates open at 8:30, but as always, it'll be running for the duration of the day. But do get in early in the fact that there's an awful lot to see. Just in terms of the actual theme, it's securing a sustainable future. And as always, there'll be a number of boards at the start, and you'll be fit to break out then and take the day as your leisure. But just in terms of some of the boards at the start, in terms of, I suppose, they'll be highlighting the challenges and what the challenges within the industry, what makes our systems profitable, and I suppose then the impact of, and some of it you touched on, James, in terms of breeding and genetics, grassland management, and I suppose the role that has to play, not only in the profitability of our systems, but also, I suppose, in terms of answering some of those challenges that will be highlighted. Then, obviously, there's a number of technology villages. I'm not going to list them all out, but there's 8 technology villages where there's going to be a swathe of the research highlighted that's been done in those areas, along with displays, demonstrations. You heard John Maher earlier in terms of that grazing demo, clover demonstrations. All of those things will be highlighted. I suppose there's a couple of new elements which may interest people. There's actually there's an international discussion where there's actually going to be international researchers available to have a discussion on the research that's going on within their own countries, and I suppose how we can learn from that as well. A big one in terms of towards the end of the day is going to be that forum around the people challenge and the labour challenge. And sometimes that's often, when we talk about the challenges, that's one maybe that is overlooked a little bit, but that's a very real challenge within the industry, and that's going to be discussed at the forum on the day. So I suppose all I will say is there's an awful lot there to see, folks. It's one day. So don't miss out. And I suppose Teagasc are inviting everybody, both farmers and industry representatives. Please do come down and join us on the day. We've no doubt that there'll be lots of good take-home messages. So I just wanted to highlight that. As I say, next Tuesday, the 4th of July, and gates open at 8:30. Next Thursday, then, we will have George Ramsbottom on talking about the new signpost advisory programme and what's actually available and how you might get involved in that. So thanks a million, folks. Thanks for joining in. Thanks again, James. And as always, folks, farm safely.